Albert Gonzalez. In the mid-2000s, the world of cybercrime found its mastermind in Albert Gonzalez, known online as Segvec and Supnazi. From his base in Miami, Gonzalez led one of the largest hacking operations in U.S. history. Between 2005 and 2007, his crew breached major companies, including TJX and later Heartland Payment Systems, stealing over 90 million credit and debit card numbers. Using techniques like SQL injection and custom packet sniffers, they infiltrated networks, harvested data, and sold it through underground forums, earning millions while consumers and banks were left exposed. But his digital empire collapsed in 2008 when investigators traced the breaches back to him. Gonzalez, once even a paid Secret Service informant, now stood at the center of the very crimes he was meant to help stop. In March 2010, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the TJX case. Just 1 day later, another court handed him 20 years and 1 day for the Heartland breach. Though served concurrently, it became one of the harshest punishments ever given to a U.S. cybercriminal, Max Ray Butler. They called him Iceman. Max Ray Butler, known online as Max Vision, was once a respected computer security researcher. But his talents took a darker turn. By the mid-2000s, Butler created Carter's Market, a secret online forum where stolen credit cards were bought and sold. It became one of the largest black markets of its time. From his San Francisco base, Butler hacked databases and intercepted data, ultimately stealing nearly 2 million credit card numbers. Investigators later estimated more than $86 million in fraudulent charges were linked to his crimes. On September 5, 2007, federal agents finally tracked him down. He was arrested and charged with wire fraud and identity theft. In February 2010, Butler was sentenced to 13 years in federal prison, then the longest hacking-related sentence in U.S. history. He was also ordered to pay $27.5 million in restitution. Max Ray Butler's case marked a turning point, proof that one man armed only with a laptop could shake the foundations of America's financial system. The question remains, if Iceman could do this in 2007, how much greater is the threat today? Kevin Mitnick. In the 1980s and 90s, one man became the face of America's greatest fear in the digital age, Kevin Mitnick. Labeled by the FBI as the nation's most wanted computer criminal, his power wasn't just in hacking machines, it was in hacking people. Through social engineering, Mitnick tricked employees into revealing passwords and access codes, slipping into the networks of companies like Pacific Bell and Motorola. He copied proprietary software, intercepted communications, and left corporations scrambling. The chase ended on February 15, 1995, when the FBI arrested him in Raleigh, North Carolina, after years on the run. In 1999, he pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, computer fraud, and illegal interception of communications. The court sentenced him to 46 months in federal prison, plus 22 months for violating supervised release from an earlier case. Nearly 5 years behind bars in total, including months in solitary confinement. But Mitnick's story didn't close with a cell door. After his release in 2000, he reinvented himself as a leading security consultant, exposing the same vulnerabilities he once exploited. Kevin Mitnick's rise, fall, and return left one timeless question. If human trust is the weakest link in security, can any system ever truly be safe? By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Kevin Poulsen. He was known as Dark Dante. In the late 1980s, Kevin Poulsen wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing control of America's phone systems. On June 1, 1990, Los Angeles radio station Kiss FM promised a Porsche 944 S2 to the 102nd caller. Poulsen rigged the game. By hacking all 25 phone lines, he locked out every competitor and guaranteed that he alone would be caller number 102. But this wasn't his only exploit. Poulsen hacked phone records, tapped private calls, and even monitored law enforcement investigations, exposing just how fragile the nation's communication systems really were. By 1991, the FBI was on his trail. After months as a fugitive, he was captured and indicted. In June 1994, Poulsen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and wiretapping. The sentence, 51 months in federal prison, the harshest punishment ever handed down to a hacker at that time. He also faced restitution payments to the radio stations he defrauded and a 3-year ban from using computers or the internet. Today, Polson has remade himself as a journalist, reporting on the very crimes he once committed. From hijacking phone lines to holding a byline in major outlets, his story forces us to ask, was Kevin Polson a reckless criminal or a pioneer who revealed the dangers of a wired world? Roman Seleznev, known online as Track 2, built one of the largest credit card fraud schemes in U.S. history. Between 2009 and 2013, he hacked into restaurants, retailers, and small businesses across America, stealing millions of card numbers. Prosecutors later estimated the losses at more than $169 million, leaving victims with financial ruin and businesses on the edge of collapse. On July 5, 2014, while vacationing in the Maldives, Seleznev was arrested by U.S. Secret Service agents. He was taken to Guam, then flown to Seattle to stand trial. Authorities called him a pioneer of the modern cybercrime market, profiting from stolen data on underground forums. In 2017, a federal jury convicted him on 38 counts, including wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and intentional damage to protected computers. His punishment was historic: 27 years in prison, one of the longest hacking sentences ever handed down in the United States. Seleznev's case sent a clear message. In the digital age, even cybercriminals hiding overseas are not beyond the reach of U.S. law. Evgeny Mikhailovich Bogachev, better known online as Slavic, is one of the most notorious cybercriminals in U.S. history. As the mastermind behind Game Over Zeus, a peer-to-peer botnet launched around 2011, Bogachev controlled a network that infected up to 1 million computers worldwide. This malware drained bank accounts and stole over $100 million from businesses and individuals. But his reach didn't stop there. The same network helped spread CryptoLocker in 2013, one of the earliest large-scale ransomware attacks. More than 200,000 victims saw their files locked with demands for Bitcoin payments to restore access, generating millions of dollars in illegal profit. In 2012, a U.S. grand jury indicted him for bank fraud conspiracy tied to earlier Zeus variants. By 2014, following Operation Tovar, an international takedown effort, the Justice Department unsealed new charges: wire fraud, computer fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering. The FBI placed him on its Cyber Most Wanted list, and the U.S. State Department announced a $3 million reward, the highest ever offered at the time for a hacker. Today, Bogachev remains at large, believed to be living openly in Russia, far beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. Vladimir Drinkman was once the quiet figure behind one of the largest hacking conspiracies in U.S. history. Between 2005 and 2012, he and his team of Russian and Ukrainian hackers targeted major companies: NASDAQ, 7-Eleven, JCPenney, Heartland Payment Systems, and more. Their method was simple but devastating: exploiting vulnerabilities through SQL injection to infiltrate networks and steal more than 160 million credit and debit card numbers. The stolen data was sold on underground forums for as little as $10 a card, fueling identity theft across the globe. Businesses and consumers lost hundreds of millions of dollars, with just 3 corporate victims reporting losses exceeding $300 million. Drinkman was the group's penetration expert, the one who slipped past firewalls and opened the door for others to siphon data. After years of evasion, he was arrested in the Netherlands in June 2012, extradited to New Jersey in 2015, and pleaded guilty later that year. In February 2018, he was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, one of the toughest sentences ever handed down for hacking. By late 2022, he had been released, but his crimes remain a stark reminder that a single skilled hacker can destabilize global systems and leave lasting scars on the digital economy. Dmitry Smilyanets was no ordinary hacker. He was the broker, the man who turned stolen data into millions of dollars. From 2005 to 2012, he worked with Vladimir Drinkman and a team of Russian and Ukrainian hackers in what became one of the largest cybercrime operations ever prosecuted in the United States. The group infiltrated corporate networks, stealing more than 160 million credit and debit card numbers from giants like NASDAQ, Heartland Payment Systems, and 7-Eleven. While the hackers breached the systems, Smiljanets handled the business side. He sold the stolen card numbers on underground markets, charging about $10 for American cards, $15 for Canadian, and up to $50 for European cards. The profits were enormous, and Smiljanets distributed the money back to the ring. The scheme collapsed in June 2012, when Smiljanets and Drinkman were arrested in the Netherlands. Smiljanets was extradited to the US that September and indicted in New Jersey. In 2015, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, admitting his role as the operation's key salesman. By 2018, he was sentenced to 51 months in prison and 5 years of supervised release, a lighter term, reduced for cooperating with investigators. Yevgeny Nikulin. In 2012, Russian hacker Yevgeny Nikulin launched a series of attacks against major US tech companies. He breached LinkedIn, Dropbox, and Formspring, stealing millions of usernames and passwords. The stolen data was later used and sold in underground forums, leaving countless users exposed. For years, Nikulin lived freely in Moscow, but in October 2016, while visiting Prague, he was arrested by Czech authorities at the request of the FBI. What followed was a 2-year tug-of-war between Russia and the United States, both demanding his extradition. In 2018, he was finally sent to face trial in the US. In March 2020, a San Francisco jury convicted him on charges of computer intrusion, identity theft, and trafficking in stolen credentials. Prosecutors revealed how his actions put millions of accounts at risk and cost companies significant resources to repair the damage. On July 27, 2020, Yevgeny Nikulin was sentenced to 88 months in federal prison. His case sent a clear message. No matter where a hacker hides, digital fingerprints can cross borders and justice can follow. Johnson James Ancheta. In 2004, a teenager from California named Johnson James Ancheta discovered a new kind of power, not over people, but over machines. Using malicious code, he built one of the first large-scale botnets, a digital army of infected computers. Ancheta's network spread fast. By 2005, it had hijacked more than 400,000 computers, including systems at the U.S. military's China Lake base and the Defense Information Systems Agency. He rented out his zombies to spammers and even installed adware for profit, earning tens of thousands of dollars. But the FBI was watching. After a sting operation, agents closed in, and in November 2005, Ancheta was arrested. Months later, he pled guilty to conspiring to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and the CANSPAM Act. In May 2006, he became the first hacker in the United States sentenced specifically for using botnets, receiving 57 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and more than $75,000 in forfeitures and restitution, including a BMW and computer equipment. Once a teenager commanding invisible armies, Ancheta's rise and fall marked the beginning of a new era where cybercrime could threaten not just individuals, but national security itself. Jonathan James. In 1999, a 15-year-old from South Florida stunned the world of cybersecurity. His name was Jonathan James, but online, he went by C0MRADE. That year, James infiltrated NASA's computer systems, downloading software used to control critical functions of the International Space Station, worth an estimated $1.7 million. NASA was forced to shut its systems down for 21 days, spending over $40,000 on recovery and security upgrades. But the breach didn't stop there. James also hacked into the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, a division of the Department of Defense, where he intercepted more than 3,000 sensitive emails and gained access to military usernames and passwords. It was one of the most audacious intrusions of its time, carried out not by a seasoned spy, but by a teenager. In September 2000, Jonathan James became the first juvenile in the United States to be convicted of cybercrime. His sentence, 6 months in a federal juvenile detention facility. The case proved a chilling reality. If a 15-year-old could penetrate NASA and the Pentagon in 1999, what does that mean for today's digital defenses? Adrian Lamo was known as the homeless hacker, drifting from place to place, yet slipping past the defenses of some of the biggest institutions in America. On February 26, 2002, he breached the New York Times internal network. Lamo added his own name to the list of op-ed contributors and tapped into their paid LexisNexis account, conducting thousands of unauthorized searches. Federal investigators closed in, and by January 2004, Lamo stood in a Manhattan courtroom. He pled guilty to 1 count of computer fraud and 1 count of wire fraud, admitting to the Times intrusion. In July 2004, the sentence came down: 2 years of probation, 6 months of home detention, and more than $64,000 in restitution. A light sentence by some measures, but a conviction that etched his name into cybercrime history. Lamo's notoriety didn't end with the Times hack. Years later, he would become infamous again for reporting U.S. Army analyst Chelsea Manning after secret military files were leaked to WikiLeaks. Adrian Lamo's story remains one of paradox: a hacker without a home, yet powerful enough to shake the foundations of government and media alike. Ross Ulbricht. In February 2011, Ross William Ulbricht launched an online marketplace hidden deep within the Darknet. Under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, he created the Silk Road, a site that became the world's largest black market for drugs, counterfeit documents, and illicit services, all paid for in Bitcoin. At its height, Silk Road generated over $200 million in sales and processed millions of transactions, shielded by encryption and anonymity networks. Ulbricht, a physics graduate turned libertarian idealist, claimed he was building a free market beyond government control. But law enforcement saw something else: a criminal empire operating in plain sight. After a 2-year investigation, FBI agents moved in. On October 1, 2013, Ulbricht was arrested at a public library in San Francisco, his laptop still open and logged in as administrator of Silk Road. The trial that followed was one of the most closely watched in cybercrime history. Prosecutors described Ulbricht as a kingpin who enabled thousands of drug deals worldwide. In February 2015, a federal jury in Manhattan convicted him on all 7 counts, including narcotics trafficking conspiracy, computer hacking conspiracy, and money laundering. On May 29, 2015, Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jeremy Hammond. He went by the name Anarchaos. But behind the screen was Jeremy Hammond, one of the most notorious hacktivists in U.S. history. In December 2011, Hammond, linked to Anonymous and LulzSec, broke into the systems of the global intelligence firm Stratfor. He stole around 60,000 credit card numbers, leaked nearly 5 million emails, and exposed private client data, some of which later appeared on WikiLeaks. Prosecutors said the theft caused up to $700,000 in fraudulent charges. The FBI had been tracking Hammond closely, helped by an informant inside Anonymous. On March 5, 2012, agents arrested him in his Chicago apartment. In May 2013, Hammond pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That November, a federal judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison, the maximum allowed under his plea. For some, Hammond was a reckless criminal who endangered lives. For others, he was a digital activist exposing hidden truths. His case remains one of the sharpest divides in the debate over where activism ends and cybercrime begins. Hector Xavier Monsegur, better known by his online alias Sabu, was once one of the most feared hackers in the world. From his apartment in New York, Monsegur rose to prominence in 2011 as the leader of LulzSec, a breakaway group from Anonymous. Under his leadership, the collective launched high-profile cyber attacks against Sony Pictures, Fox Broadcasting, and even the U.S. Senate, all in the name of chaos and defiance. But the empire of disruption collapsed quickly. On June 7, 2011, the FBI arrested Monsegur. Facing the possibility of decades in prison, he made a fateful choice. He agreed to cooperate. Within weeks, he had secretly pled guilty to 12 counts, including computer hacking and fraud, while continuing to work online as Sabu under FBI supervision. For nearly 3 years, Monsegur's cooperation was described as extraordinary. His information helped authorities identify and arrest fellow hackers, including members of LulzSec and Anonymous, and his work prevented hundreds of potential cyber attacks. When he finally faced sentencing on May 27, 2014, the outcome stunned many. Instead of a long prison term, Monsegur was sentenced to time served. Just over 7 months he had already spent in custody, followed by a year of supervised release. The judge credited his extensive cooperation, which dismantled major cyber networks and aided national security. Once celebrated in the hacking underground, Sabu became infamous as an informant. His story remains one of the most controversial chapters in the history of cybercrime. Hamza Bendalaj. In January 2013, at Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport, a smiling young man was led away in handcuffs. His name was Hamza Bendalaj, known online as BX1. Bendalaj was no ordinary hacker. He was one of the developers and distributors of SpyEye, a powerful banking Trojan that infected millions of computers worldwide. SpyEye silently captured online banking credentials, drained accounts, and gave cybercriminals access to staggering sums of money. For years, Bendalaj traveled internationally, operating under the radar, while financial institutions reported devastating losses. But the hunt finally ended when Thai authorities, working with the FBI, arrested him during a layover flight. Just months later, he was extradited to the United States. Prosecutors described SpyEye as the leading banking malware of its time, responsible for nearly $1 billion in financial damages. Bendalaj faced a 23-count indictment that included wire fraud, bank fraud, and computer fraud. In 2016, he pled guilty. The court sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release. To some, his smile made him the happy hacker, but to U.S. authorities, he was one of the most notorious cybercriminals in history, a man whose code left banks and victims counting their losses for years to come. Alexander Panin. In the hidden corridors of the internet, one hacker became a global threat. Alexander Panin, known by his alias, Gribodemon. Panin was the primary author of SpyEye, a powerful banking Trojan designed to steal financial data. Released in 2009, it allowed cybercriminals to siphon money directly from online bank accounts. By 2011, authorities estimated that SpyEye had infected more than 1 million computers worldwide and caused nearly $1 billion in losses. SpyEye wasn't just a tool, it was a criminal marketplace. Panin sold customized versions for thousands of dollars, providing his buyers with the ability to capture logins, skim credit cards, and even bypass security systems. In 2010, he also obtained the source code for the infamous Zeus Trojan, merging its capabilities into his own creation. His global run ended on July 1, 2013, when he was arrested at Atlanta's airport after a flight from the Dominican Republic. In January 2014, Panin pleaded guilty in federal court to conspiracy to commit wire and bank fraud. 2 years later, in April 2016, he was sentenced in Atlanta to 9.5 years in U.S. federal prison. Alexander Panin built one of the most destructive cyber weapons of his time. Paras Jha was no ordinary college student. At Rutgers University, he secretly engineered one of the most disruptive cyber weapons of the modern era, the Mirai botnet. Between 2014 and 2016, Jha and 2 collaborators built Mirai to hijack vulnerable Internet of Things devices, routers, DVRs, and security cameras. With hundreds of thousands under his control, he unleashed waves of powerful DDoS attacks. At Rutgers, those attacks repeatedly crippled the university's servers, locking students and staff out of essential systems. But the damage didn't stop on campus. In September 2016, Jha released Mirai's source code online. Within weeks, cybercriminals worldwide were using it to launch massive assaults, briefly knocking parts of the internet offline and exposing how fragile global networks could be. Federal agents traced the attacks back to Jha. In December 2017, he pled guilty to charges tied to both Mirai and the Rutgers attacks. His punishment reflected the scale of the crime: 6 months of home incarceration, 5 years of probation, 2,500 hours of community service, and over $8.6 million in restitution. The case proved a chilling truth. One student with code and intent had the power to shake the internet itself. The real question is, who might be building the next digital weapon right now? Vladislav Klyushin. In cybercrime, some don't just steal money, they steal tomorrow's headlines. Vladislav Klyushin, a Russian businessman with ties to the Kremlin, ran a Moscow IT company serving the Russian government, but between 2018 and 2020, prosecutors say he and his associates hacked into U.S. filing vendors, stealing pre-release earnings reports from firms like Microsoft and Tesla. Armed with that inside knowledge, they executed a hack-to-trade scheme, placing bets on Wall Street before the public ever saw the numbers. The payoff? Over $93 million in illegal profits. In March 2021, Klushin was arrested in Switzerland. By December 2021, he was extradited to the United States. A Boston jury found him guilty in February 2023 of securities fraud, wire fraud, and hacking. That September, he was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison, ordered to forfeit $34 million and repay millions more in restitution. But in August 2024, his story took a dramatic turn. Klushin was freed in a high-profile US-Russia prisoner swap, ending his prison term early. Bogdan Niculescu wasn't just another hacker. He was the leader of the Bayrob Group, a Romanian cybercrime syndicate that infected more than 400,000 computers worldwide. From 2007 to 2016, Niculescu and his partner, Radu Miklauș, built a sprawling malware operation that turned ordinary PCs into tools for fraud. Their scheme was ruthless. Victims received emails that looked like they came from trusted names: Western Union, Norton Antivirus, even the IRS. Once opened, the malware hijacked entire systems, stealing personal data, bank credentials, and contact lists. The infected machines were drafted into a botnet, sending out millions of spam messages and even hijacking computing power for cryptocurrency mining. The group also ran elaborate scams, fake eBay and vehicle listings that tricked victims into wiring money for cars that never existed. By the time investigators caught up, the damage reached into the tens of millions of dollars. In 2016, U.S. authorities worked with Romania to extradite the hackers. A jury in Ohio convicted them in April 2019 on all 21 counts, from wire fraud to identity theft. Niculescu was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, while Miklauș received 18 years. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.